Here we are with Dr. Anthony G.J. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Just got back from ice skating.
You did?
Yep.
And you just got some new ones formed to your feet, correct?
Got some new ones. They're a little bit big, but
are they?
Probably better. My last ones were too small.
Okay.
Getting blisters.
Were you a rollerblader in a past life?
No, a hockey player. I was a team captain, and I was real serious about it. Had surgery on my leg. I broke my leg, had a tumor in my leg, and they had to take a piece of my hip out and put it into my leg because they did surgery to remove this tumor. Mm-hmm. And it was such a big chunk of bone, they actually had to take a piece out of my hip to put it back in my leg. So kind of ruined my hockey career. I had that surgery twice. The first time they said, we got all the tumor, no reason to worry, we got it all. A couple of years later, same exact injury, playing hockey, snapped in half. They did x-rays. Oh, shit, This tumor is back, eating up your bone. Yep. So it's a little setback.
Did they offer you an opportunity to grab the piece that they needed from a cadaver?
They did on the second one. So they reassured me that my hip bone was going to grow back, and it didn't. I mean, it still looks like they took a big gouge out of my hip. So the second time they did it, they said, it's okay, we'll just take the other hip. And I was like, no, that's not happening. And what's the alternative, right? And that's exactly what they did. But then they said, well, you can get AIDS. Like, well, I'll take the risk. This was back in the 90s. And I said, I'll take the risk.
Why wouldn't they just test the damn dead body for AIDS?
I think it was a mixture of different people's bones. I don't know. There's apparently a risk. It's a good question, but that's what they told me.
There is a chance you can get AIDS. That's so squirrely. Well, yeah. I guess I'll take a risk. Yeah. I mean, even though Magic Johnson just came out with AIDS, I'll take a risk.
Right.
Gosh, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, so I got back into it. This year is my first year ever since high school playing hockey. So I found a men's league in town, and it's pretty badass, actually. I'm impressed. Like, one of the guys from the Gophers and, some Division I guys, they're pretty impressive. I thought I was going to be one of the better players, and I'm probably one of the weak links. And, again, shocking to me because I thought I was good, which is good. I like being challenged. I'd rather play with better players.
Is it a no-check league?
Oh, yeah. But they wear full pads. I showed up the first day. All I had is knee pads and a helmet, jeans, because my brother plays in a league. He used to play in a league in St. Cloud, and I used to play with him with the St. Cloud State guys and all this. And that's what they do, right? They show up, knee pads, helmet, no checking, and no slap shots, and that's the same rules here. These guys have their full pads on. They got jerseys, everything. And so, of course, I'm like the jeans guy now, even though I got all my pads and everything, all the subsequent games. So I'm kind of like the weird guy who doesn't know what he's doing, but it's good. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a biohacker?
Yeah, maybe not as extreme as some of them, but I mean, for example, last week I got a vitamin D lamp, which is really interesting. It's like $400, so not your average person's gonna, they're not going to go out and get a vitamin D lamp, but it doesn't damage your DNA. It has the specific wavelengths that don't give you a tan, which is unfortunate for a lot of people, but for me, it doesn't really matter. I'm not getting one anyways, but it gives me the vitamin D within like 3 minutes. So it's UV, but again, it's really precise wavelength. And, I'm tinkering with that, checking my blood, watching it go up. It's pretty cool. You can feel it. Like your skin gets all tingly. So I do little things like that, infrared light. Nothing too crazy. Injections, like we were talking about before the show. I do a lot of peptide injections.
So do you treat yourself as like a human guinea pig, kind of?
Yeah, a little bit, for sure.
Do you, as a scientist, do you do it to push science, or do you do it for your own longevity?
Mostly for my own purposes, because, when you start looking at the research, it's pretty clear a lot of these things are really beneficial, but there's no big corporation that's going to push it, on the public or, make it affordable for everybody. So basically I figure, well, this is clearly beneficial in all of these animal studies or whatever. Let me try it on myself, see how I feel, right? And measure it, right? You measure blood, do blood work, do tests, try and figure out if it's working for me, because everybody's an N of one, right? So everybody's different enough. So I think these things have to be tested individually. And I do DNA testing. I don't know if we even talked about that.
I really wanted to get into that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be how, everyone's, I would hope, heard about CRISPR and things like that, how they're genetically modifying. Right. But with just for the lay person, to be able to tell if, you stand a higher risk of getting heart disease on a later date. I think it's very beneficial to know that.
Right. Yeah, and you can be a lot more precise with the genetics. A lot of people now, they're saying, well, DNA is not the whole story, right? Now we have epigenetics, right? That's marks on top of your DNA. And if you understand how piano music works or how notes work on a staff, your DNA is kind of like a melody. It's like dit, 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 dit. That's a melody, real simple, single notes on a staff, right? But the epigenetics are like marks on, they're notes on top of those notes. So like the chords, you know, like a guitar player would play just the chords. That's your epigenetics. You still have the melody, still have the DNA, doesn't change. Pass that on to future generations, whatever. You can pass that piano music to you. You can play it, he can play it. But then with the epigenetics, you got the chords. Those can change, right? And the melody stays the same, but you can pass that on to future generations as well, which is huge news. That's a pretty recent discovery. So now a lot of people are saying, well, it's all about epigenetics, right? Because we discovered that. And it's not really. I mean, DNA is still super important. It's still the blueprint, right? It's still the melody. So they're both massively important. And I mean, the epigenetics, we don't have a cheap way to look at it at this point. I mean, it costs about $20,000 to get your epigenetics sequenced. So I'm working with the DNA for now.
So can epigenetics, can it get triggered by trauma?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can change your epigenetics for good or for bad. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book that I wrote, Estrogeneration, is because these estrogen mimicking chemicals we're being exposed to all the time, they alter your epigenetics, as well established. You know, so basically the sex hormones, including testosterone, right? That would be an example for a man. Increasing your testosterone beneficially improves your epigenetics. So it can literally improve the next generation. So let's say you bulk up and get big, and then you have kids. Your kids are actually more disposed to being healthier and stronger just from the epigenetic changes. And let's say you're more like me when I was in college, right? Like super scrawny. I mean, I've improved a little bit, but not a lot. But, you know, that guy is going to pass on a lot of those weaker epigenetic marks, and that can be changed, you know?
It's literal procreation.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
I was talking with my cousin yesterday who has celiacs.
Yeah.
And she got before she got diagnosed with celiacs, before her symptoms started kicking in, she had a very bad sinus infection the year prior. And I remember this time in her life, it was traumatic, man. She was wiped out, had to quit her job at the time. And it was even the doctor attributed that traumatic event to the triggering of her celiac disease, her autoimmune disorder. Is that a possibility?
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time. And you'll see genes, right? Like genes that dispose you to a higher risk of celiac. One of them is called ATG16L1, for example, if people want to Google it.
Yeah.
It's autophagy related, 16L1. It's related to autophagy, if you know what that means. It's like basically your cells taking out the garbage, taking out the trash. So some people, their cells don't do that as well as they should. And by the way, intermittent fasting really helps for that.
Okay.
You know, if you've got a weakness in that.
So is that for the most part, like I do it, so I eat for 8 hours and I fast for 16 hours?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Like skipping breakfast.
And like that also helps your human growth hormone too, correct?
And a lot of other things. Yeah. It helps your thyroid. It helps your brain. Some people have genetic risks for Alzheimer's where their brain doesn't take out the trash as well as it should. Their brain doesn't have as much autophagy. So intermittent fasting is huge in that case, right, for mitigating that risk. And that's with the celiac situation. Again, you'll see those genetic risks. It doesn't mean you're for sure going to have it, right? Just because you have a 2-fold increased risk for celiac or a 5-fold increased risk, maybe even a 10-fold doesn't mean you're going to get celiac. But exactly what you said, you trigger it with some life event or something often, and then boom, you got it. It's a struggle. It's difficult to get over it.
So when it comes to like psoriasis, is that your skin like tenfolding and attacking itself?
Oh yeah, you were interested in psoriasis.
Yeah, because I have psoriasis. Yeah. So I've been cutting out gluten and I'm noticing it get better.
Right. Yeah, it's almost always some gut related issue. There's a couple of psoriasis related genes that can give you a higher risk for it. One of them is actually related to stem cells.
Okay.
So your body, again, we'd have to look at your genetics, which we should do in a future podcast, probably. But one of them is basically your skin produces less stem cells. And one of the ways, of course, to improve your stem cell production is actually take retinol. Like that's a supplement. Infrared helps too, by the way. Infrared increases, I think it doubles your stem cell production within like 24 hours.
Okay.
And I think it's like 8-fold over the course of a week if you use infrared every day, like an infrared sauna. But retinol also helps. That's an easier way to do it than buying a fancy infrared light, because to use infrared, you have to have a pretty strong therapeutic dose of it. You can't get a cheap infrared light on Amazon or something. It has to be real, a real high-end, therapeutic infrared light.
Thaddeus Owen, I'm looking at you, baby. Primal Hacker, I need an infrared light.
Oh, yeah.
Give me that.
He's got one.
Wholesale homie discount. Primalhacker.com, baby.
Yeah.
You know Thaddeus.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've seen his infrared pictures on Instagram.
Well, Star Tribune just did a story on him, came out and interviewed him and Heidi, and it was so interesting because him being a friend and the knowledge he's given me, whether it be with 5G technology, whether it be with about water, it's just so interesting that human beings, we've kind of been self-sabotaging ourselves, and the corporations have been, in a nutshell, they've been the middleman. They've allowed us things at ease because we are born consumers, but really they're to detriment to our genetics, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, that's, like I said, why I wrote the book about estrogens, because, I started having kids and started looking into these chemicals. I did my PhD on hormones. So it was interesting. One of the anecdotes I tell people about when I was doing my PhD, just down the hall, we had a scientist who, he's kind of an angry guy, just not pleasant to be around, but a legit good scientist, right? He's married to a medical doctor. And when I was doing my research, it was harder for me to get testosterone, like literally more red tape, more paperwork, more like weighing it out and make sure you don't miss like a 0.01 grams or else you're getting all kinds of fines, that sort of thing. And whereas cyanide, which he did research with cyanide, super easy to get a hold of. You just basically buy it, comes, no big deal, nobody pays attention. He murdered his wife with cyanide and almost got away with it. He basically put it in her protein shake and killed her. And he's in prison now. Yeah, and like I said, they almost overlooked it because nobody's paying attention to how much cyanide is missing. He's missing all kinds of cyanide, and the only reason somebody caught it was he was trying to get a cremation rushed on her, and one of the nurses saw her blood was this weird color, and then they tested for cyanide because that's one of the indicators, and sure enough,
Bro, he's probably the Walter White of prison right now.
It's pretty.
He's just mixing up the medicine in prison, wherever he is.
Yeah, I think he's in Pittsburgh now, but yeah.
Dude, what do you write him letters or something? How the hell do you know that?
No. I mean, I know one of his Asian researchers.
I got you.
I went to Florida with him. He's a friend of mine.
Man.
But the point is, right, when you're doing some of this hormone research, it's obnoxious the way they treat testosterone, like this banned substance and all this politics behind it. But anyways, as I was going through that whole process, I started to find these man-made chemicals like BPA, right? And like oxybenzone you find in sunscreens. I mean, literally, you go to Walmart, look at all the sunscreens. Oxybenzone. Parabens, right? You've heard of those maybe.
Yeah.
Because on a lot of the personal care products, it'll say paraben-free if you get good quality ones. I started to realize those all act like estrogen in our bodies.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, for men, obviously that's bad, right? You don't want to basically be dosing yourself with estrogen. Women too, though, man, it's pretty rough on women. And the reason for that is our testosterone's probably in the 1,000, around 1,000, hopefully, maybe 500, somewhere in that range. And women are super, super low. But with estrogen, we're not that different. Like men are about 20 nanograms per liter with estrogen. Women are also about 20. Most people don't realize that. But then depending on the time of the month, they go up to about 200. So it's 20 to 200. But it's still pretty similar, right? Like most people, if you were to ask, where do you think women's estrogen is? Ours is 20. They're going to say, in the thousands, right? We're swimming in estrogen.
Yep.
That kind of thing. It's not that different. So when women are exposed to these estrogen mimicking chemicals, totally messes them up too. You see fertility issues. You see breast cancer skyrocketing. Everybody's passing out pink ribbons to raise awareness. Nobody's raising awareness of these chemicals that are actually causing the problem. You know what I mean?
Do you think this is influencing the demasculinity, the feminization of society and males as a whole right now?
Yeah. In fact, I did a YouTube video on that. I thought I was going to get a bunch of pushback. I had like transgender people saying, it's funny that you say that. I totally agree. This is, what happened to me as a child. And they relate some story about being exposed to all these chemicals, like running behind the mosquito sprayer in Florida or whatever. And there's even scientific publications specifically using the word feminization of males. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, people are kind of political about it, and they call it like gonadal deformations, mm-hmm. and they kind of couch it in these weird technical terms, but it's male feminization. I mean, even lowering your testosterone, that's a form of feminization, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And if you put a bunch of these chemicals in your system, it will lower your testosterone. And vice versa, like on the flip side, if you get these chemicals out of your life, I've seen people double their testosterone in 6 weeks. So you can you can go in a better direction. And women, by the way, are chronically low in testosterone as well in our culture. So it's benefiting women to increase testosterone too.
What about deodorants?
Yeah. I mean, they've got a lot of these fragrances. It's almost always the cheap fragrances.
Okay.
Where they don't tell you what's in it on the label. They don't legally have to, because it's like their secret ingredient, mm-hmm. their secret formulation. So they're not legally obliged to put all the ingredients. And they always have the cheap petroleum chemicals that act like estrogen in them. So you want to find something that's, got chemicals they can pronounce, right? Like coconut oil or something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's coming from the shampoos, it's coming from the soaps, it's coming from the deodorant, like you said. And the other thing about deodorant now, they're putting aluminum in it, of course. Mm-hmm. And they just did a study this year. It wasn't super scary. It was just basically saying, oops, we do get some, scientists used to say aluminum is inert. It's an inert metal that doesn't go through your skin. Now they're saying, oops, it goes through your skin. It's not super dangerous doses, but it goes through your skin. The reason that's kind of a big deal, it has been downplayed a little bit, but it's a big deal because aluminum bioaccumulates. It builds up in your body, in mm-hmm. particular in your brain. So if you're dosing yourself every day with deodorant, you're only getting a little dose, but over years and years and years, particularly if you have bad genetics for clearing heavy metals, and a lot of people do. Yep. Some people have genes related to their brain and issues clearing heavy metals from their brain. Some people have issues with other parts of their body clearing heavy metals. Then those people are real susceptible, to having those issues, including Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of where we've really become the guinea pigs, is seeing at what phase is Alzheimer's and dementia going to start kicking in earlier in people's lives, our generation.
Yeah. Because
we've been soaking up these chemicals for so long. It's beyond the estrogenization. Mm-hmm. It's who's going to start losing their mind earlier.
Right.
That's what frightens me, which is why I've been supplementing for over a decade, just because I give a shit about upstairs.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, too many people who are just clouded out, and it's tough to have conversations nowadays with people where it's like they're trying to tell me something, but they can't get it out. They just have this, and they're not a heavy pot smoker. They don't drink a lot. They just can't spit it out.
Right.
And it's like, we're supposed to be having a conversation here, and you can't even tell me what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It's
connected.
Walking brain farts. And it scares me because, man, people, I just get the feeling that it's something that we've been consuming for a long period of time. And for some people's makeups, it's kicking in earlier rather than later.
Yeah, especially with the carbs. I mean, a significant percentage of people have issues with their brain dealing with high carb diets, mm-hmm. high blood sugar, that sort of thing. I just gave a talk for the Special Forces about a month ago. They don't allow me to push it out there on social media and things, but mm-hmm. I can talk to people about it.
Yeah.
And the topic, because I used to do Alzheimer's research way back, the topic was brain optimization. So that was the exact topic, right? Because there's actually a lot of similarities between just head injuries from impact blasts and things like that to Alzheimer's. You actually get plaques in your brain. But what I do is I look at the genetics and I say, okay, here's your risk. Like I say, maybe you're not clearing heavy metals very well. Maybe your brain doesn't deal well with high blood sugar. Maybe your brain needs more cholesterol. A lot of people need more cholesterol. Mm-hmm. All the doctors are telling you to lower your cholesterol. The brain, literally 1/3 of your brain, if you dehydrate your brain and weigh out the components, 1/3 of it is cholesterol. Right? So if you got super low cholesterol, your brain's not functioning optimally. It's just the way it is. And some people really have issues with that genetically. So they're more susceptible. And it's not all about Alzheimer's, right? It's all about optimization. Like, it takes decades for the Alzheimer's to come out. That's the far extreme. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, right now, while you're young, your brain's just not performing optimally, mm-hmm. like you said.
Is that why this keto diet has become so popular, because of the fat, and it's helping people's brains click better?
Oh yeah, huge. I've done it. Sound like Donald Trump. Huge. It's huge.
It's huge. A million Y's.
As soon as you say the word huge, it comes out. But the keto diet for me, I did it. I can only do it for about 6 weeks at a stretch because I lose my sleep cycles because my brain is so amped up. I literally can only sleep like 3 hours a night, and I have a little bit of trouble sleeping anyway. So it's me specifically, but it's pretty impressive. I mean, you put your brain on ketones and it's like rocket fuel. It really motivates me to do things. And, you know, again, for me, I have to cycle in and out of it. So I do that, but I also do intermittent fasting. So my body makes ketones at night and things like that. So I kind of tap into that all the time. But in my definition of ketosis, of keto diet, is pretty strict compared to most people. I do the therapeutic ketosis as if I've got seizures or something. Yeah. So that's 80% fat by calories. Yeah. And then 15% protein and 5% carbs, which is pretty hard. If you eat too many avocados, you get too many carbs. Yeah. On that. But it's effective. If people want to do keto, try that for 6 weeks. It'll blow your mind.
It's been very tough for people because we are in a carb-based society.
Right.
It is so hard for people to just wean off of carbs.
Yeah.
And I think I know I've been self-aware enough where I know if I have too many carbs, it just bogs me down.
Yeah.
Brain fart central. Man, that's why I don't eat. Shoot, you barely ever catch me eating pizza, but I definitely would never go out to lunch with friends and go to pizza. Right. Because I know what that means my afternoon is going to be like.
You're just taking naps.
Just snooze fest.
Yeah, same.
You know?
Yep.
But I mean, so many people, they just live with, got to have my PB&J for my 9 a.m. break. I got to, we're going to go out for pizza. Or they go to Subway. They eat a foot-long sub. And it's like, dude, do you know how many carbs you just devoured?
Right.
Get ready for a nap.
Yeah. Yeah. If you do keto, you can't have that many carbs in literally like a month.
Really?
Well, if you're doing it strict. Again, there's different degrees of keto. But yeah, I'm the exact same way. And I think a lot of people are, and a lot of people don't realize because they wake up in the morning. Let's say they wake up at 6 a.m., they have a cereal, right? And then they get hungry around 9 a.m., they have another carb-loaded snack, granola, something. Noon, it's just insulin all day long. So they don't even know what it's like to feel optimized. So they think that tired feeling is normal. And
doesn't our body break down carbs just like it breaks down sugar, which is why diabetics cannot have carbs or too many carbs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, carbs, carbs is just a broad term. It's kind of like saying automobile, right? And sugar is a more specific term. It's kind of like saying Toyota or something like that. I mean, it's all, carbs are all encompassing. You got fructose, you got glucose, you got complex carbs, you got, it's the whole picture of all the carbs, yeah.
If you were to recommend somebody to reboot their gut biome, where would they start?
Ooh, interesting.
Would it be like a probiotic and prebiotic? Would it be a green smoothie in the morning?
Yeah.
Would it be a multi-enzyme?
For me, it would probably be a 3-day fast.
Okay.
If you really want to kick it in. Just because people are eating and eating and eating, and it's a stressor, like eating is a form of a stressor. And I do a 3-day fast every year. It depends on the person. Obviously, some people can't do that. Most people can, but they don't have enough discipline to do it. It's hard. I mean, all you're doing is thinking about food all day long, and your metabolism goes down. I mean, you get cold, but after a couple of days, you actually start to get back into it. It's pretty interesting how your body responds, but you feel pretty miserable. But what happens is your gut bacteria have to be more efficient. They're forced to. So it's a little bit of like learning how to swim by throwing you into the lake kind of thing. But I mean, it's an effective way to do it. I do it. And I've even done a dry fast this year. I started trying out dry fasting where you don't even drink water.
Okay. Oh, Jesus.
And I only did it for 24 hours, but I mean, in theory, it's pretty interesting because basically, when carbs get stored up in your body, it's called glycogen. You have these big stores of glycogen. And every molecule of sugar on those glycogen stores has 4 water molecules attached to it. So as you burn that, let's say you're fasting, right? And you're burning all that glycogen, you're burning that storage, you're releasing a ton of water into your body. And what do people do? They're chugging water as well. So it's harder for their body to break down those fats and break down those glycogen stores because they're pushing all this water into their system. while their body's trying to release more. You know what I mean? So the best thing to do is to actually take electrolyte pills and actually go the other direction and say, hey, tell your body, hey, it's okay. Break that stuff down, break that fat, get rid of that water, It's like
a purge.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gut bacteria, like I say, they become more efficient. Another way I like to do it is the sauna. I personally started using the sauna this past year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just because the research was so powerful in favor of it, and it actually benefits your gut bacteria.
Dr. Rhonda Patrick is who put me on it.
Yep.
Because I'm addicted now.
Yeah. But
I didn't know it affected your gut biome as well.
Yep.
What?
Yeah, man. The heat shock proteins. So you increase the amount of heat shock proteins, which are like they look like barrels. If you look at them on the atomic level, it's literally like a whiskey barrel. Mm-hmm. And the reason your body makes more of those when you have heat stress, like 180-degree sauna, is because your body is trying to recycle a bunch of used junky proteins that it has sitting around. It's taking out the trash, right? Like I was saying before. And it actually does that by putting them into this barrel and refolding them because they get kind of messed up. It puts them in the barrel, which allows them to refold on their own. They kind of spontaneously refold properly, and then it spits them back out. So they're more functional. It's almost like going to the car shop and getting your oil changed or getting your car fixed. You got a bent up body. You go to the body shop, they fix it up. That's exactly what happens in this whiskey barrel. And that's what happens when you go in the sauna. But it's cool about it. Yeah, your body increases these heat shock proteins, these whiskey barrels. Your gut bacteria also increase their heat shock proteins, so they're improving.
Oh, man, there's joy in misery. There really is.
Yeah.
Because it gets to the point where it's like, I don't know if I can do it, but you just stick it out. Right. And as you keep going back to the well, per se, you just feel this natural energy that comes out of you. And I didn't know, I'm sure the gut is probably playing a part in that energy.
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And, I mean, like I say, they've even done studies on that. If you have an improved gut biome just from using the sauna, it improves your testosterone, so that goes up. So it's kind of a holistic thing. People are just thinking of one thing or another thing, and there's a lot of things. I personally just use earbuds. I wrap my phone in a towel. I bring it into the sauna because it's so difficult for me. I can't do.
You're rolling the dice.
I can't handle it if I'm not distracted. I basically have to distract myself by listening to something just to get through it. But
so you're saying if Timmy starts using the sauna more, he'll be less flamboyant?
I don't know. He's there every morning. Heck yeah. That's awesome. That's better than me. I only do it 3 times a week. So they did a 20-year study. This guy, Jari Laukkanen, that Rhonda Patrick talks about a lot, over in Scandinavia. 20-year study, and the people that use the sauna compared to people that don't use the sauna, the minimum effective dose, they had to at least do it 3 times a week before there was benefits, and at least 10 minutes per session at 180 degrees. Now you can have 160 degrees or something, but then you have to go longer and all this. But the really interesting thing was cancer decline. You had less cancer in the sauna users. You had less Alzheimer's. You had less dementia. You had less heart disease. Literally everything, like all the diseases that they have that they were checking for, everything went down with the sauna users. But again, the minimum effective dose, you got to hit that. It's like going out in the sun, like if you go out in the sun for 1 minute, you're probably not really getting a lot of benefits. But if you go out, and if you go out too long, of course, you're going to get sunburn. Same thing with a sauna, right? So there's a minimum effective dose before you're making vitamin D and all this other things.
Let's talk the happy drug, serotonin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plenty of that comes from our gut.
Right. 80, 90%. Yeah.
That was insane to me when I learned that.
Yeah.
Because it makes so much sense as to, when we just start eating like shit and we continuously pile that on day in, day out, no wonder you're depressed. No wonder you're down in the dumps. No wonder you're always tired.
Right.
So this is just kind of pointing out how important our gut biome is to just our happiness.
Yeah. 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 It doesn't matter what your genetics are. If you got crappy gut bacteria, if you're destroying your gut, if you're not taking care of your gut, you're not going to be producing enough serotonin. And what's interesting too, going back to the genetics, I mentioned this on the phone when we were talking, there's actually genes related to how well your body transports serotonin into your brain. I think it's called TPH2. That's one of the genes. It's a serotonin transporter. So some people don't transport it very well, right? So then they're really screwed. If they got bad gut bacteria and they're not making enough serotonin, and then they're not bringing it up into their brain optimally, right? Then they're really behind the 8 ball. And then there's another gene called HT8 HTR2A or something like that. It's hydroxytryptamine. It's really like that's the old way of saying serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
So like in old school science, they didn't used to say serotonin. They called it hydroxytryptamine. They gave it a different term. So the gene is basically your hydroxytryptamine receptor. And it's how well you bind serotonin, how well serotonin sticks in your brain. And some people have a genetic issue with that. So serotonin doesn't stick as tight. And that increases your risk for depression and schizophrenia and all kinds of other things, mostly just feeling down in the dumps, like you said. And so let's imagine you've got bad gut bacteria and you're not transporting it as well into your brain and the receptor's not sticking tight, right? Well, then you want to bump that serotonin up.
It's so tough when people are very short-sighted. They want to start blanketing. They just want the easy way out, so they go right to an SSRI or something like that. It really worries me when my doctor isn't also a dietitian, because we need to baseline ourselves. Right. You know, and it honestly, in a nutshell, it can take just 3 weeks of a green smoothie in the morning, along with I take like 6 different things and then follow all that up with magnesium before I go to sleep. It's only a 3-week process to reboot my gut, and there's no dairy involved and no gluten. And then I have to do that to figure out what I was allergic to. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's how I found out it was gluten.
Yeah.
And then you start reintroducing. If your body reacts, in my case, my psoriasis, if it reacts, it tells me, okay, I can't have gluten. So it's 3 weeks off of everything. And then you reintroduce either gluten or dairy for 3 days, off for 3 days, reintroduce dairy or gluten, the other one for 3 days. And that's what's going to give you your telltale sign. All it is that kind of process. Unfortunately, people, it's my money and I want it now. Or they don't want to go through blood testing, or they don't, and it's very worrisome when a doctor isn't asking people about their second brain right off the bat, their gut. Right. What have you been eating? What's your exercise regimen like? They don't even know what heat shock proteins are. They don't even know who Wim Hof is, who is literally able to push out poison from his body that they inject with him through breath work and cold shock.
Right. LPA, it's called. Yeah. Lipopolysaccharide. Yeah. The problem is the medical school education. I mean, my dad's a doctor. My brother's a doctor. They don't teach them any of that stuff. And by the way, that serotonin receptor, it binds psilocybin. That's why they're researching it, right? It binds a lot of those, those psychoactive compounds. That's one of the reasons it kind of resets a lot of those emotional issues for people.
Because you probably knew that. I microdose.
Yeah.
LSD. So I microdose with psilocybin.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if it binds, is that a good thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It bumps up. It basically increases your response to serotonin, right? It's activating the serotonin receptor. Yeah. So let's say you don't do that as well as you should, right? And again, I can't tell you that without looking at your DNA, but let's assume that
talk dirty to me.
Let's assume that you're not activating your serotonin receptor. MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, obviously those SSRI prescription drugs, those ones are all activating the serotonin receptor to differing degrees with differing side effects, things like that. But
those are cheat codes. There's no, I am very, because they've diagnosed me as allergic to those things. Like I literally just cannot take them, psychotic episodes, So it got to the point where I just started flying to the jungle. Fuck that. I'm going to drink ayahuasca. I'm going to go reset myself. And then what I learn is like, oh my gosh, these all natural plant medicines are a savior because of how I feel personally and how consistent it is. There isn't a borrowed effect where you feel like it's a cheat code because there's the up and then there's the down. Right. With psilocybin microdosing, I don't like to trip out. People might categorize me as someone who's a psychedelic adventurer. I don't like to trip balls. I think I've seen that and it's good for me. It played its role, but the time has come for me to just baseline myself. And with microdosing psilocybin, you just notice a consistent okay with being okay. You're just happy and you're just okay. And then creatively, oh boy, what comes out of that? And then sleep schedule where you're getting sound sleep, you're actually able to dream. We're really trying to kind of push that agenda where, no, we're not trying to trip out this society. We're really just trying to baseline society so people can be okay with being okay.
Right. yeah, man, that's the way to go, right? You don't need these real extreme highs and you know, and again, it's so variable. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up gluten because I'm sensitive to gluten as well. And back when I discovered that was back when scientists were laughing at that. They were saying, no, there's no such thing. If you're not celiac, there's no such thing as being gluten sensitive, you know? And now, of course, it's well established. Scientists recognize this. And what's really interesting is my wife's not gluten sensitive, but she's dairy sensitive, which is, you know, too bad because one of my daughters, she's got both of them. She can't do dairy or gluten. And so obviously that's a tough one these days. And I'm not trying to like take it into left field here. I want to go back to gluten because I was going to mention before gluten, it acts on your, they call it gluteomorphin, right? It acts like, just like when you inject morphine, it acts on your opioid receptors. So it's actually addictive. And so for people that are trying to get off it, it's unbelievably difficult. There's only a few things that act on, like a few of these plant compounds that act on your opioid receptors, and gluten is one of them. Casein is another one in milk. So they call it caseinomorphin. And, you know, so, and you find these things like you find gluten in breast milk, for example, it's clearly going through people's gut and into their bloodstream. So, you know, it's addictive, and so is dairy, you know, so it's difficult just for people that if they're trying to do these things and they'll feel drawn to it. They'll go through withdrawals literally. And so just be aware of that and the challenges with that.
They did that study on cheese where it was firing off the same receptors as if you're a heroin addict.
Right. Sugar too. Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy, right? It's not easy to get off that stuff.
Food is a drug.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think evolutionarily it's because, you know, there's a lot of feel good associated with that. So when you're breastfeeding or something, there's a lot of bonding and that.
Oh, there's a lot of feel good when you're sucking on some tatas.
Right. So we've basically taken that to the next level with these grains and with these dairy products. I mean, if I was designing a beer I want to be optimally addictive, I'd put a bunch of casein protein in there and a bunch of gluten in there, right? Like if I was insidious and trying to design something just specifically to make people addicted. And they do that. I mean, they hire biochemists just like myself to specifically do these things.
Do you ever see that where there's kind of like Dr. Evil, the Walter White of prisons, your old teacher or whatever, who ended up
killing his wife,
Xing out his wife? Do you ever see that in the industry where, because I have friends who have worked for my boy Nelson. He was an engineer for the FDA for 25 years. Mm-hmm. And then he got to the point, he's like, man, we're working on all these studies that like they're meant to get people addicted to shit.
Right.
Do you ever see that with your friends or colleagues where it's like, well, they could actually go off the deep end if they were thrown enough money?
Yeah, they do it all the time. In fact, I mean, there was just this recent case, I think it was yesterday, with a couple of my colleagues from Boston University. That's where I did my PhD, Boston University Med School. 2 of them got arrested because they were working with China on something, you know, something related, something pretty sketchy. But I mean, I don't know anybody directly. I know people that make chemicals, you know, for like these plastic companies and things, and they've talked to me about that because, you know, there's cheaper ways. There's cheap chemicals that act like estrogen, like we talked about BPA and things. But then there's also better chemicals that you can use to make plastics that don't have those estrogen properties. They don't act like estrogen in your body, but nobody's making them because it's more expensive. It's like 1 penny per bottle more to make that. So when people are competing with each other, it's all about money. But I also know people that work for these brewing companies that design these artificial flavors to try and imitate good quality beer. I think there's some documentaries on this. Dogfish Head, you know that brewery? Mm-mm. They were featured in one of these documentaries because the Budweiser company was basically making spin-offs that kind of looked really similar to the Dogfish Head beer and tasted really almost identical. They were basically imitating the flavors, but they were doing it with artificial chemicals instead of real products. Like Dogfish Head is using real products. Mm-hmm. And they've got these biochemists, you know, these molecular engineers making fake chemicals to imitate this. And then they were making up these labels to make it look like it was a microbrew or a craft brew, but in reality it was Budweiser. And then they're couching it under a shell company. So you basically can't tell unless you're like really digging into it and you think you're supporting a small local brewery. And you're just buying cheap ass beer with artificial chemicals that taste pretty similar. It's really irritating.
Do you think... after the plastic patch started.
Yeah, the Pacific garbage patch.
Yeah, after that started piling up, do you think that's where rainbow fish come from?
Man, they showed in a fish study that BPA and birth control act the same. Actually, in the 1920s, I think, is when they were researching BPA as a birth control, and then they discovered that it makes plastic, and they said, "Well, this is cool. Let's go in this direction." And you know what they did is they assured everybody it's okay. BPA doesn't leach, right? And obviously now it does. We recognize it does. I mean, it's in the nanogram levels, but remember, our estrogen is 20 nanograms per liter. It's in the nanogram level. So when you're drinking nanogram levels of BPA, you're getting actual doses that your body has of natural estrogen, right? And by the way, like 17 states have made BPA illegal. And what companies have done is they've made BPS instead of BPA. They just changed the letter on the end. So it's almost identical, and they've done studies whether or not that acts like estrogen, and it's just as estrogenic. It acts just as much like estrogen. People can look it up. They can look up BPS, BPF, BPAF. You can just keep changing the letters, and that's what the companies do. So even when you try and make these things illegal, especially in children's products, right? Because you got children sucking on like BPA pacifiers and things, and it's a problem. I mean, you're seeing these little kids coming in with gynecomastia. They're developing breasts. They're going into puberty at age 9. And they've even published scientific journal in the medical journals. They're trying to redefine the normal range of puberty and make it younger, because so many kids are going into puberty at super young ages now because of all these estrogen chemicals. So rather than identifying the chemicals and saying, here's the problem, let's get these chemicals out of our life, they're saying, well, everybody's going into puberty, let's just redefine it. And then that's what they did with testosterone, right? They lowered the normal range. Yeah. So if you come in with 200 on your testosterone, which is obscenely low, they say you're normal.
I'm 740.
Good.
I believe 740 or 760. I got it tested last year along with my thyroid and some other stuff.
Yeah. How's your thyroid?
Thyroid, I got it tested. My thyroid's good.
Yeah.
But I got it tested because we have hypo and hyper within my family.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be proactive about it for my metabolism. Mm-hmm. But really it was like, dude, just change your fucking diet and quit eating so shitty.
Yeah.
You know? Didn't they say that
is that what the doctor said? That was a quote?
I came to that conclusion basically. If my thyroid came back high or low, then I was obviously going to do something about it more than just diet. But since it came back normal, I figured let's just, manually control my metabolism.
Well, iodine helps too. I mean, most people don't realize iodine is a building block for thyroid hormones. Like you need iodine to make thyroid hormones. And a lot of people, they're not like clinically deficient, but they really suboptimal in iodine. They're really low. And if you're really low, I mean, your body's going to struggle to make the optimal amount of thyroid hormone. So your energy is going to be low, your metabolism is going to be low, and who wants that? And as we age, by the way, everybody's thyroid hormones decline. So like in my mind, literally every 80-year-old should be on thyroid hormone, like a replacement therapy. Mm-hmm. Of course, none of them are, except the people that are really paying attention, because of who wants low energy, right? Yeah. Like it's stupid. But again, then you need a prescription, you need to work with a doctor. They're not all about optimizing people. They wait until you have a sickness. They wait until you're on your deathbed, whatever. Then they're going to try and help you. But nowadays, I think taking matters into your own hands, like you're doing, is definitely the way to go. Pay attention to those levels, optimize them if they're a little bit low. But like I say, take iodine too, because you're probably not eating enough seafood. And if you are, you're probably getting too much mercury nowadays,
Take iodine.
Yeah. You can get a dropper and just put 1 drop in a glass of water in the morning, chug it. It's done. Yeah. And it builds up in your body. So you don't have to take it every single day. You can take it like every 3rd day.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what I've been doing with collagen as well. I've just been just take a scoop, put it in my green smoothie in the morning along with my reishi mushroom. Nice. Apple cider vinegar. Yep. Is there any benefits of drinking apples or just say a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Lots of them, and they're published. I mean, not a lot of people talk about them because it's not as much of a money-making thing. There's no patents on apple cider vinegar, but just vinegar in general is acetic acid.
Okay.
And acetic acid is basically a short-chain fatty acid that your gut bacteria make if they're healthy. So you're basically promoting healthy gut bacteria when you have acetic acid, when you have these short-chain fatty acids. You've probably heard of MCT, right? Medium-chain triglycerides.
Absolutely.
Right. And
shout out to onit.com, MCT oil. Go get it.
Yeah, I mean, just don't take too much of it, right? But one of the reasons MCT is so good, and the reason I say don't take too much, you get diarrhea if you take too much.
Gent, that explains it.
Well, it's because basically your body can't, when the fatty acids are that small, in our fat cells, we've got fatty acids that are about 16 carbons long, right? 16 to 18. MCT is about 8 to 12. That's the range. So when the fat is that small, your body can't store it as fat. So you either have to burn it for energy, which is awesome, right? That's why MCT is awesome. Or you have to get it out of your system fast, right? Because you're not storing as fat. So you get diarrhea or you burn it for fuel. So it helps to kind of work into it a little bit. But the other reason MCT is so beneficial, it's so short that it gets burned down to the acetic acid, right? These even shorter chain fatty acids, which benefit your gut bacteria. So it's a win-win.
This is going to be a weird question, but I've heard this on multiple accounts. The shape of women's breasts, with all of these chemicals being put into our consumptive goods, comparing breasts to back in the day to how they are shaped now, so many have attributed it to what we're consuming. The shapes of breasts.
I don't know anything about it.
It's crazy. I forgot where I heard it the first time. Bro, think of Michael Bublé's back in the day. Saggy, we're talking, them things were dead by the time that woman was 26, okay? Nowadays, in the Instagram model universe, total different look, man. Total different look. And I'm trying to attribute it to what people have been consuming, what's in their plastic bottles and things like that. Maybe they left them in their car too long and came out, took a swig. They're getting a little bit more estrogen. It's interesting to think of just like generationally how the shape of breasts have changed. And then when you factor in all this stuff that's in these things we're consuming, it might play a role.
I'm sure it does. And I mean,
that's my bro science for the day.
Super interesting. I want to see your resources, but your sources. But I mean, there's another component, of course, which is testosterone is lowering. And if you're fattier, if you're eating, a lot of carbs and your body's storing more fat, there's more aromatization. So the testosterone gets converted to estrogen. I'm sure you've heard of like aromatase inhibitors, or maybe not.
I have now.
Yeah. So instead of taking testosterone, a lot of people use these drugs called aromatase inhibitors. So testosterone can actually get converted to estrogen through this enzyme called aromatase, right? So that's another battle in your body going on all the time, is like how much testosterone. If you amp your testosterone way up high, a lot of guys get man boobs because if their testosterone is too high, their body just starts converting it to estrogen, and then their estrogen goes sky high. So if you're a bodybuilder, I work with a lot of bodybuilders. Ben Pekulski, he used to be a Mr. Olympia contender.
I've had Dorian Yates on the podcast.
Yeah, cool. Wow. Yeah, I mean, all those guys, right? Like I'm a partner with Ben Pekulski, so he's... So
you ever heard of Gary Vee?
Oh, yeah.
Yo, stationary astronauts fucking figured it out. I don't know how, with the fucking haircut and everything, but he fucking did it.
That's awesome. Man, nice soundboard. But yeah, Ben Pekulski trains professional bodybuilders, like the guys that are competing in Mr. Olympia. I think the client that got second place in the past Mr. Olympia, I was down there the week before Mr. Olympia working down there with Ben Pekulski. And I do DNA for all those guys. All of his clients automatically do their DNA and help optimize. But of course, they're all on aromatase inhibitors, right? When their testosterone is sky high, you have to take aromatase inhibitors because of that conversion. But what also happens in women, if they're fattier, right, they're going to aromatize a lot more. If you got more fat, you aromatize more. So you convert more testosterone to estrogen, which happens in men too, by the way. So it's a struggle for, obese men to increase their testosterone. And it's kind of a vicious cycle because testosterone helps you burn fat. But then if you're fatter, your body's converting all your testosterone to estrogen. So it's making it worse. Because having estrogen, when a woman becomes pregnant, her estrogen goes sky high. It goes in the thousands. And the reason for that, one of the reasons, is your body stores more fat. Like a pregnant woman stores a lot of fat because our ancestors didn't always have access to food, right? And the most efficient storage form for energy is fat. So if you don't have access to food, you need that fat, so the fetus can still have energy, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a man and you're taking in all these estrogens, like you're rubbing them on your skin with your lotion and all these artificial personal care products, and you got all these plastics everywhere, and you're heating them in the microwave and making it worse, right? More leaching. You're basically telling your body, I'm pregnant, let's store more fat.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't doing a lot of leg work for, say, obese men, isn't doing more leg work, squats, deadlifts, elliptical running, isn't that really good for testosterone production?
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Heavy lifting in general, but yeah, the quads are your biggest muscles. So increasing those increases your body's own production of testosterone.
Did you hear that, Jet? More butt lifts for you.
Do squats? Yeah. Squats are the best.
Can't you tell by his mustache? His testosterone's coming out of his face. Damn, dude. That thing's got to be investigated.
Porn star mustache.
Jan, what would your porn star name be? DJ, what was it?
DJ Quads.
Yep, he's like off topic. All right. When I heard that about just like doing leg work that can help produce testosterone, it was so interesting to me. So when you're talking about obese males who find it hard, they're basically, going against the grain in a nutshell. If they got into doing more leg work, all the while, obese people, once they start losing weight, bro, those muscles don't leave.
Right.
They got some big old calves. They got some of them Elefante calves, dude. They got some of them Loops calves.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. I see a lot of pointing going on over here in the background.
Yeah, we were talking about Loops athletic calves earlier today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually, like when I was living in Boston, I lived in Boston 10 years and I did a lot of squatting. Now I've kind of gotten out of it, unfortunately, just because I'm lazy. I'm busy.
Yeah.
But I was actually skating a lot faster, like 5 years ago when I wasn't even playing hockey and I wasn't training, just from the squatting. It's amazing, man. I mean, people that are skipping leg day to try and build their upper body are missing the point, because if you're bumping your testosterone, it's a lot easier to build that muscle on your upper body. I'm a fan, and I'm a big fan of compound movements, period, right? So instead of isolating just your bicep, it's better to do pull-ups, right? Or pull-downs with a cable, because you're actually using your bicep, you're using your forearms, you're using your lats, you're connecting all of that in a kinetic chain. So you're you're more resistant to injury. Similar with squats, right? You're not just kicking up a machine and working just your quad muscle in isolation of everything else. You're working, basically a holistic system. And actually I do some consulting on this because people's genetics differ, obviously, in terms of their muscle fiber types and in terms of what their optimal training should be. And as a basic starter package, if people have fast twitch muscle, explosive muscle, I recommend they do what I call the big 6 movements. And the big 6 being squat, deadlift. So that's a push-pull with your legs. Bench, row. So that's a push-pull with your arms, right? And then overhead press, pull down, which is a push-pull in the vertical direction. So it's a whole body, big compound movement. You can really just do 2 of those each day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2, 2, 2. Deadlift, squat, bench, row, overhead, pull down. It's amazing. It transforms people, man, if you don't have a foundation of strength. Now, if you're a super advanced lifter, you can go way beyond that. But for the first couple years, you can make massive gains just with those 6, just 3 days a week. Get plenty of protein.
That's why we're seeing such a, because people are looking for functional strength as well and functional movement. We're seeing, the renaissance of kettlebells as well.
Yeah.
Big time.
Right. Yeah, that's basic. I mean, kettlebell swings are basically just deadlifts, just an explosive deadlift. So it's a compound movement. It's awesome. Yeah. And you're using a lot more stabilizer muscles, right? Like if you're doing an overhead press with a kettlebell, you got to stabilize the crap out of that thing, because it's going to it wants to wiggle, it wants to tear away. It's not a machine, right? That's only on one certain plane that's fixed. So if the problem with using these machines, if you get addicted to them, you're just going up and down in the exact little plane, and all those little stabilizer muscles, they're shut off. They're not even working. They're not activated. So then when you actually lift your kit above your head, or you actually have to overhead press drywall and you're putting on a ceiling or something in your basement, those little stabilizers are super undeveloped and they just rip right out. And how are your joints? I mean, you were talking about your joints before with collagen, right?
Yeah, so my shoulder, I had shoulder surgery, had a cadaver's knee ligament get tied down because I tore my AC joint completely. Yeah. So they had to tie my clavicle down. It was more like a cosmetic surgery. I went through it though because it started getting in the way.
Shoulder implants.
Bro, give it to me. Give me all this smoke.
He's got the lats.
No, but they
cadaver lats. Yes, cadaver lats. Put
I
in.
got lucky though. I had Dr. Dom. She's one of the top man, and she actually invented this surgery. With how she did it, I don't know.
Local? Like
from Mayo Clinic, and she's also the Minnesota Timberwolves team doctor as well as the Minnesota Lynx.
I know who she is. Yeah, she's an orthopedic surgeon. I was in the orthopedic surgery department. I've seen her talk. And
Diane Dom.
Yeah, I don't remember her name, but I know that she was the basketball teams ring a bell. Yeah.
I call her Bay. She's a shoddy. No, she's literally short as shit. I really like her, and she was a character, and I guess I just got the luck of the draw to get her. But she just did a bang up job. I went through physical therapy, things like that. And now I'm really kind of trying to fine tune those twitch muscles you're talking about, or those fibers that need to be fired off now. And they were always focusing, Nick, and this was a very enlightening experience through physical therapy where we need to get everything else around your shoulder stronger. That way your shoulder can get stronger. I never would have thought of it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I work with some pro athletes like on the Minnesota Twins and their bullpen and stuff like that. And other teams, all kinds of different pro sports. And one of the things about the pitchers in particular, the braking system, like when they're throwing a fastball, a lot of times the actual throwing muscles are well developed, but the braking muscles on the other end, they have to strengthen those because they're underdeveloping their chest muscles, for example, like their lats and their hips and their glutes and all this, and even down in your hamstrings and your legs. A lot of that's powering the throw. But then after you throw it, there's a lot of braking that needs to go on because you're going so fast. And a lot of times those muscles need to be developed, and people totally overlook that. You know what I mean? Have you ever done electrical stimulation?
Yeah, I go over to Optimal Movement pretty much every single day. I just go sit in their chair. They've got an electrified chair. I just go post up, boom, 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 boom. Just fires you off. And the cool thing is where you feel the jolts, the real jolts that kind of hurt, are that's what needs the most work.
Yeah, yeah.
It was very interesting to me.
Yeah, those like blocked up spots.
Yeah. And I feel it like,
I thought you were gonna like put the electrodes here is what you're blah 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 you're doing.
Dang, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to get electrified, if you know what I'm saying, Tim.
Yeah, they're selling, like you can use them at home now. How did you get into it, Tim? Was it just from the rehab?
Phil got this pad.
Which one's Phil?
Phil Kish, Dr. Phil Kish. He's a master acupuncturist at Optimal Movement. He owns Optimal Movement. Yep. So he actually got this pad that you would stand on, and it would electrify through you as the facilitator, and then you would use your fingers to pulsate parts of bodies. So you would kind of like go into cartilage and go into tissue and really just stimulate it on the patient. That got to be, man, he had me doing it on him too, because he was just renting it for a month to try it out to see if he wanted to start implementing it. And it got to the point where it's like, holy, not to mention it's a $30,000 machine. So it just got to the point where it's like, I think I'm going to return this thing. We'll try some other stuff out. And it's a chair that actually looks just like that one right there. And they're pads. And then there's other things that you can like wrap around your arm. Smaller ones that you can just plop on you. There's a big one you can lay on. It's kind of wavy. That one's cool too. But it's so awesome to just roll in there. I do it after acupuncture because he puts his needles in you and then he throws pulsating waves. He clips it on to the specific needles that he has in you and then fires stuff off. Awesome. I guess I'm just having friends who own these businesses, right? And the likes of you. I'm lucky.
Yeah. Well, have you had him on the podcast, Phil?
Yeah, Phil's been on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Timmy was on. I mean, this is a couple years ago he came on. We got to bring him back in. His clinic's literally right over there. I'll introduce you sometime. Him and Doc Carter, too, who's a chiropractor. I love doing chiropractor, not just for me, but for my daughter to prevent ear infections. She's never gotten an ear infection, and I've been taking her to the chiro since she was an infant.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah. I threw my back this year, first time in like 10 years. I used to throw my back every year. I have like a herniated disc when I was 12 or something, or 14.
Well, Doc, we got to get that figured out.
Well, you know what's funny? I learned how to deadlift, and I haven't thrown it since. But this year, I had a lot of extra stress with a couple talks with the special forces and a lot of extra traveling and whatnot. And I threw my friggin' back out. And what was interesting for me is I actually got on some testosterone, and it healed it up like that. Because it was taking me a long time. It was a couple weeks of just sitting around like I can't barely move. And then I bumped my testosterone up. Testosterone, of course, just amplifies your body's ability to heal. So that's how I did it this time. It feels great now. And it was like immediate. It was like 3 days of that, and I'm back in the gym, you know?
So this is what
there's a
we're
lot
gonna
of
do.
different ways you can do things.
We're going to put all of us, our production staff, my partners, everybody, we're going to put everybody on testosterone, and we're going to bring you back in 60 days. No, we'll all go do P90X, so we'll bring you back in 90 days, and everyone's just going to be jacked. You ready for this? Timmy, I don't know if you can get even more jacked.
It'll be a challenge.
Timmy won't even be able to turn his head. He's yeah, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, Timmy, can we borrow some of your testosterone?
The Trenbolone on the fake stuff. Well, what's funny about testosterone, just like these estrogens, like BPA, right? It's not a real estrogen; it's a fake estrogen. It imitates estrogen. Testosterone, they have the same thing. They've got like Trenbolone and some of these other ones. They're not actual testosterone. They're just like testosterone, but they're designed to stay in your body longer.
Okay.
So if you really want to get jacked, those are the way to go. You know, like to use those fake testosterones that stay in your body.
I'm ready. I'm ready to get on TRT, HGH. I'm ready to get on everything.
Your T is good. I mean, 700 is pretty impressive.
Dude, let's get me higher, bro. Let's take this thing.
I would go with the symptoms. I mean, yeah. You can actually mess up your sexual drive and all kinds of stuff if you're unnaturally high. You know, you throw your body out of whack. Like I say, sometimes you actually amp up your estrogen too high. There's stuff that's
I need it for healing though. And maybe it's just HGH because I got diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis as well.
Yeah,
and that's been a doozy, man, with my knees. Not so much my ankles that I've sprained more times than God. It's been my freaking knees, man, and my neck, my shoulder. I just want to heal.
Yeah, we should look at your DNA.
Let's do it.
Start there.
Let's do it. Where can people find you?
ajconsultingcompany.com. Pretty terrible URL.
AJ, that's very long.
ajconsultingcompany.com. I came up with it literally 11 years ago when I started a company. I had to do a government contract project. I was designing viruses for the government.
Okay.
To try and cure Alzheimer's. We were actually putting them in, we're drilling into the brains of mice that had Alzheimer's, and then we're putting viruses in there to see if we could cure it. So I was actually making the viruses, and then I started a consulting company to do that. And they just said, well, what are you going to call it? And I said, well, AJ Consulting Company, right? It didn't matter at the time. And now, of course, it's stuck and I can't really change it. So I'm screwed. That's where it comes from.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.